The culture war is raging on as Disney's support for grooming children seems to be backfiring, with Ron Desantis, governor of Florida, now threatening to pull Disney World's special governing status. They've had the status for about 50 or so years and allows them to basically govern themselves on their own property. Ron DeSantis is saying wokeness is a threat and he's not going to stand for it. Now, when I say Disney is supporting the grooming of children, I mean it. They are. Initially, they didn't know what to do in the face of the Parental Rights and Education bill, which the left claims is the Don't Say Gay bill. Of course, the left is lying and wrong and desperately trying to justify why this bill does what they claim it does, when in fact the Parental Rights and Education bill just makes sure that schools are informing parents about what's going on with their children, and it prevents discussions about gay or straight or otherwise for kindergartners to third grade. That means 5 to 9-year-olds. But there's something about the left. They're just hell-bent on having secret adult conversations with children ages 5 to 9. Now, I can sit here and say, I don't necessarily understand why, but I think we mostly have, we have our theories. Now, Disney has come out in support of the activists, claiming that the Parental Rights and Education bill is Don't Say Gay. Okay, it's a lie. And Disney has made their bed because the reality is most Americans do not agree with this grooming of children. When they actually look at what's being proposed, most Americans in the polls that have come out support the legislation. Look at what happened. Look at what happened in Loudoun County. Parents were livid, and a Republican ended up winning governorship, partly due and largely due to wokeness and critical race theory. The only thing these cult members can do is try and spin a narrative, try and lie, or they're now filing lawsuits. NPR reports LGBTQ groups sue Florida over the so-called Don't Say Gay law. I can't imagine this lawsuit succeeding because the bill actually prevents a teacher from discussing heterosexual marriage and traditional coupling as much as it does anything else. It's a lie. The fascinating thing here is that many news outlets are claiming, but so many are on board with this. Certainly the Daily Wire is in the wrong. The Daily Wire announced they're going to be dumping, $100 million into children's content, which will be available starting next year. And Axios reports, but most corporations disagree with the Daily Wire, and they support the activism in Florida and the grooming of children. The only way a child can come to an idea is if they're exposed to the idea. Harriet Tubman famously said, or maybe it's apocryphal, but I believe she said, "I have freed many slaves. I could have freed many more if only they knew they were slaves." Ideas are everything. You plant an idea, you can change someone's world. And that's what many of these teachers are trying to do. Many kids may be depressed. There are predators in schools who groom these children into ideology and identities. Now, whether or not a child actually has an identity or a depression issue or a mental issue or physical, it's the problem of the parents. Now, the left is trying to push this narrative that, but what if the parents are abusive? I'm not going to out my kids. They're minors. You're not their parents. Why should a teacher, a random person, have more privileges with a child than the child's parents? Of course, they'll claim it's because the parents are abusive. Well, Ron DeSantis is striking back, and we've got some polls to talk about showing most Americans don't like wokeness. The Democrats are the creepos in the minority, and it's about time people stood up to them, which is what the Daily Wire is doing. So my respect to the Daily Wire crew, Jeremy Boring, Ben Shapiro, and everybody else working there who's pushing back and developing culture. Let's read this first story and see how Disney is going to be reeling from their support of child grooming. Before we get started, head over to timcast.com and become a member to help support our work, these videos, and all of our journalists. As a member, you'll get access to exclusive episodes of the Timcast IRL podcast, where we talk with a variety of guests. We've had a bunch of really great people like Steve Bannon, Marjorie Taylor Greene, and you guys will probably get a kick out of these episodes because it's probably not what you'd expect. Sometimes we talk about weird stuff too, like science and sci-fi and psychedelics or religion. But as a member, you're keeping all of our journalists employed. So don't forget, you can also smash that like button right now, subscribe to this channel, share this video anywhere you can on social media to help us grow. You guys are our grassroots marketing. And now let's get into the first story with Ron DeSantis. signaling support for stripping Disney of special self-governing status as feud escalates. CNN reports Florida Governor Ron DeSantis on Thursday signaled support for stripping Disney of its 55-year-old special status that allows the entertainment company to operate as an independent government around its Orlando area theme park. It's the latest fallout in the feud between DeSantis, a Republican widely seen as a potential 2024 contender, and Disney, Florida's largest private employer. After DeSantis signed the bill into law earlier Monday, the Walt Disney Company wrote in a statement that its goal was to get the law repealed and defeated in the courts. DeSantis previously said Disney crossed the line with that statement. On Thursday, DeSantis went further, suggesting Disney's special privileges could be lifted. Quote, Disney has alienated a lot of people now, DeSantis said at a West Palm Beach press conference. And so the political influence they're used to wielding, I think, has dissipated. And so the question is, why would you want to have special privileges in the law at all? And I don't think that we should. DeSantis' remarks follow a revelation that some Republican state lawmakers are considering repealing a 1967 state law that established the Reedy Creek Improvement District, giving Disney the power to establish its own government in Central Florida. Quote, yesterday was the second meeting in a week with fellow legislators to discuss a repeal of the 1967 Reedy Creek Improvement Act, which allows Disney to act its own government. State Rep. Spencer Roach, a Republican, wrote Wednesday on Twitter, if Disney wants to embrace woke ideology, it seems fitting that they should be regulated by Orange County. Lawmakers recently concluded their legislative business for the year and would not be able to repeal the act until they meet again next year, unless DeSantis or legislative leaders convene a special session. Interesting. It appears that that's actually happening. Ron DeSantis is going to be, or at least I believe he's considering or maybe calling a special legislative session, which could deal with redistricting. It could deal with Disney, and it could even deal with constitutional carry, which I am a huge fan of. That would mean you won't need permits. You can walk in, you can buy a gun, and you can carry it as you see fit. I'm a big fan of constitutional carry. But here is where I find the culture war getting truly interesting. The bill, in my opinion, I agree with most parents. It's a good thing. How is the left going to actually convince regular working class Americans, mom and dads, that teachers should be allowed to have secret conversations with children ages 5 through 9 about sexual issues? It's freaky. It's really freaky. Here's the story from NPR, and then we'll get into what Daily Wire is doing and the lies, as it appears the left is losing these culture war battles. NPR reports gay rights advocates sued Florida Governor Ron DeSantis on Thursday to block a new law that forbids classroom instruction on orientation and identity in kindergarten through third grade. Why? Just let third graders be third graders. It still doesn't even stop them from having private conversations with these kids. The law has catapulted Florida and DeSantis, a potential 2024 Republican, to the forefront of the culture wars. Critics call it the Don't Say Gay law and argue that its true intent is to marginalize LGBTQ people and their families. Yeah, only the ones who are trying to have sex conversations with 5-year-olds, which is bad in any respect. I don't care if you're gay or straight. It's just weird. The challenge filed in federal court in Tallahassee on behalf of Equality Florida and Family Equality alleges that the law violates the constitutionally protected rights of free speech, equal protection, and due process of students and families. Wrong. I'm not a judge. I'm not a lawyer. But I can tell you, the First Amendment, free speech, does not stop the government from restricting itself. If the government says employees of the government can't do this, well, there you go. Now, the bill also includes private third parties giving instruction as well. Yes, the government can say inside a school, publicly funded, there's certain things that cannot be funded or scheduled or paid for. That is to say, while you can certainly protest in a public building, the government can restrict itself from hiring or bringing in people to work for on specific issues. The government can restrict itself. Let's read. Quote, this effort to control young minds through state censorship And to demean LGBTQ lives by denying their reality is a grave abuse of power. I think they're going to be hard-pressed to convince a judge when the defense for Desantis says, Your Honor, this also prevents teachers from talking about straight traditional marriage. It's not targeting any individual group. Judge is going to be like, yeah, that's true. Here we go. Quote, the United States Supreme Court has repeatedly affirmed that LGBTQ people and their families are at home in our constitutional order. The state of Florida has no right to declare them outcasts. And it didn't. Hey, how about that? Or to treat their allies as outlaws. And it didn't. How about that? By punishing schools where someone dares to affirm their identity and dignity, the lawsuit says. So what? Think about what this means. They're trying to use LGBTQ as a shield for saying they should affirm themselves to children. What does that mean? Giving classroom instruction on being gay, straight, or otherwise. Instruction. Listen to this, okay? I'm not going to play games. I'm going to pull up the law. Classroom instruction by school personnel or third parties on sexual orientation or gender identity may not occur in kindergarten through third grade through grade 3, or in a manner that is not age appropriate or developmentally appropriate for students in accordance with state standards. What does it mean to instruct? Instruction isn't just lessons. Now, they may mean that. Legally, it could just mean like a classroom lesson. But it says instruction. This to me, I believe, is more encompassing than just explaining that you have a boyfriend. There was a viral story about a teacher appeared on MSNBC who was gay and said that he wanted to explain to his kindergartners who his boyfriend was. Yeah, it's one thing to say that you have a boyfriend, and perhaps these conversations are better suited between you and your parents, or when the school deems that these lessons are necessary, and to have a classroom instruction on who your boyfriend is. That is weird. Who supports that? They say, this is NPR, by the way, saying this. The law deliberately employs broad terms and invites arbitrary and discriminatory enforcement, empowering parents to be roving censors who can sue school boards for damages based on any perceived violation, the lawsuit adds. Good. It restricts the government and it empowers people. Who are these people who want the government to just have all this power? Crackpot authoritarians. The law states, as I already read, classroom instruction. U.S. Education Secretary Miguel Cardona met with LGBTQ students and their family members at a school in Orlando on Thursday, discussing privately how the legislation is affecting their lives. Cardona's visit was one of several Biden administration events Thursday, showing support for the queer community, including a presidential proclamation recognizing Transgender Day of Visibility. We know while many transgender students experience valuable support at school, many others face significant challenges because of hostility directed at them by others. This includes a growing number of state laws that bully and intimidate LGBTQI+ students and their families. DeSantis and other Republicans have repeatedly described the rules as reasonable, saying children should learn about orientation and identity from their parents, not in schools. We will make sure that parents can send their kids to school to get an education, not an indoctrination, the governor said when he signed the law this week. Many critics have said the law's language, particularly the phrases classroom instruction and age appropriate, could be interpreted so broadly that discussion in any grade could trigger lawsuits. Yes, it could. I think even proponents recognize that. Creating a classroom atmosphere where teachers would avoid the subjects entirely. Well, that's up to them. Intense public backlash followed the bill's introduction in Florida's Republican-controlled legislature this year, with the White House, Hollywood celebrities, students, Democrats, and LGBTQ advocates condemning the policy. Legal challenges have been expected. Yeah, because they're groomers. They really are. Not every single person, not every single Democrat. They're desperately trying to obfuscate what's going on. But the reality is we're talking about 5 to 9-year-olds. Now, perhaps there could be a conversation with 12-year-olds about, let's just say, adult issues that are not appropriate. And that is going to be up to a judge to interpret, which means when laws get passed, there are legal challenges and judges interpret the law. But what we're getting now is a backlash because this bill will stop a straight teacher from talking to 5-year-olds about men and women coupling. Yeah, how about that? Well, here's where we're headed. The Daily Wire says it's pouring $100 million into kids' entertainment, striking back. Bravo, Daily Wire. They say the move, executives say, is in response to Disney's positioning on Florida's parental rights and education bill, known as the Don't Say Gay bill. No, it isn't. You just call it that. I call it the Don't Say Straight bill. But Disney has begun to speak out about the bill in response to backlash that it didn't proactively denounce it initially. Americans are tired of giving their money to woke corporations who hate them, said Daily Wire co-CEO Jeremy Boring in a statement. They go on to say, the Daily Wire is expanding, they're growing, they did Harry's. The big picture. They say Daily Wire pushed into Razor brand, selling over 45,000 Razor subscriptions in 7 days. Yes, but part of the Daily Wire's appeal is denouncing efforts its audiences see as overly progressive, even when other major corporations don't agree. Dozens of businesses, including Starbucks, Nordstrom, Pinterest, have condemned the Don't Say Gay bill. LGBTQ plus advocates argue the law would impact the mental health of youth. Yes, I agree. It would impact the mental health of youth in a positive way. Now, as for these other businesses, Starbucks, Pinterest, Daily Wire, do you really need to open up a chain of coffee restaurants? Yes, you should. Maybe I'll do it. The problem for me is, we're trying to do as much as we can, and I'm just one person, but we certainly could, with your support, open up the coffee business and then just start expanding. Maybe we should. People like coffee. We'll just do it. It's actually not that difficult. It's just time consuming. And I mean it. The Daily Wire, apparently, I believe they say here, their 12-month revenue hit $100 million for the first time in January 2020. I think Jeremy was saying it was 120 million? So they're getting around, what is it? Yeah. They're getting about $10 million a month. They could certainly afford to launch a chain of coffee restaurants. Anyone who wants to come out and say that 5 to 9-year-olds should be having sexual conversations with adults in secret, I have no problem doing everything in my power to shut you down and strip you of any kind of societal power you think you have or can cling to. That includes Starbucks. We praised Starbucks when they allowed their employees to come back. I'm not playing this game. It's punishment time now. Starbucks, you want people to have secret conversations with 5-year-olds about sex? I'm not for that. So now we're seeing people come out and saying, time to boycott. It's also Disney employees. Fox News reports Disney employees issued dire warning about the economic consequences of new leftward lurch. With respect to those who came out and stood up, and this guy says that there's a lot of employees at Disney who are not woke. I get it, but blah, blah, blah. The economic consequences, they don't care. They never cared, and it's time to jump ship. If you work at Disney, it's time to apply at the Daily Wire. I know we here at Timcast, we got to get on top of this stuff. We got to figure it out. Who wants to open a restaurant? Who wants to open a coffee shop? Let's do it. I'm not even kidding. We'll start small, and our entire operation will be about expanding, because we're never going to play these games. We're going to open a coffee shop, and we are going to subsidize it. We're going to run at cost. We're going to pay above market wages to all of our staff, and every penny of profit will go right back into expanding. We've got the nonprofit on fact checking. It just takes time to build this stuff. It is not easy. Man, talent is the hard part. Managerial power. But I crave launching these projects to give a big fat middle finger to each and every one of these insane cultists. Which brings me to an insane cultist over at Twitter. Abigail Disney, who is the grandniece of Walt Disney, the granddaughter of one of the co-founders of the Disney Corporation, goes on to lie and gives an interesting argument based off something Christopher Rufo said. Christopher Rufo tweeted just 2 days ago, "We are waging moral war against Disney. We are directly targeting their public reputation. We are turning half of their customers against them." Sure, I think Disney's done that themselves, to be completely honest, but I believe messaging has helped inform people of the disgusting behaviors of these Disney employees. You know that a bunch of people who worked for Disney were arrested for child trafficking, right? Abigail Disney says, like all radical ideologues, the right wing has finally run amok and is coming to devour the hand that feeds it. Business. For my part, I am delighted. It is the business world that has been, either by act or omission, feeding the opportunist right wing to distract us with culture war nonsense while they rifle through the till and empty everyone's pockets. Are you nuts? The establishment, the cultural institutions are controlled by the left. She even admits it. Going on to say, you need two things to rule with a minority. Wait a minute. A minority? I thought you said that big business was feeding them, but they're in the minority? You need to be constantly looking for fresh meat to throw the minions to keep them riled up at all the time. That works until the herd thins. Remember Scar and Lion King? Blah, blah, blah. It's really only a matter of time. Blah, blah, blah. In the second tweet, she says, this anti-woke right-wing nonsense is unsupported by a large majority of Americans. In fact, most Americans are offended by it and wish it would just go away. These people live in bubble world. Let me assure you, my friends, you are not in the minority. First, from Civics polls with 310,482 responses, spanning April 25th, 2017 to March 31st, 2022. We can see that currently, Black Lives Matter support is basically 50-50. 44% support, 43% oppose. And there was actually a period where in November, it was 44% oppose, 43% support. Now, this is tremendous. Although, if you go back to 2017, there was majority opposition to Black Lives Matter. Support for Black Lives Matter spiked at 52% to 29% opposition. It's now collapsed. Why? Let me show you. If you look at only Democratic responses, you can see that 85% support Black Lives Matter. However, there has been a drop from peak support of 5% from 90 to 85. Perhaps negligible, but Democrats overwhelmingly support Black Lives Matter. Among Republicans, I think it's fairly obvious. 87% oppose. Amazingly, though, right after the George Floyd incident, opposition from Republicans was only 59%. It's skyrocketed today to 87%. So, Tim, you say, how is it that this lady can claim the overwhelming majority of this country does not support the anti-wokeness? She's lying. Because when you add independents into the mix, what do you see? 45% opposition, 36% support. That is to say, at the very least, general polls show it's split down the middle. To say the majority, it's unsupported, just not true. Among independent voters and Republicans, opposition is clear. It's only among Democrats that support is very high. So when Abigail Disney says it is unsupported, it's just factually untrue. Case in point, let's read through what we got here. From inside sources, wokeness CRT costly to Democrats in last week's elections from November 10th, 2021. Perhaps James Carville and Bill Maher are onto something. The fiery Carville, a Democrat, said on PBS, stupid wokeness is costing the party. Yeah, Youngkin won because of what was going on in Loudoun County. Here's a story from commentary.org. Voters think Democrats are focused on culture wars because they are. From Politico, Democrats are losing the culture war. A messaging shift won't save them. The party must point to deeds, not words, to show they understand voters' concerns, but they don't. They don't. The Democrats are just riling up people around trash issues that they think will play well with the press. And regular Americans who don't pay attention are genuinely confused why people like David Hogg, the gun control guy, thinks adults should have secret conversations with 5-year-olds about sex. Yeah, I don't quite understand what his activism is supposed to be about either. And it shows you something. Why is the gun control guy coming out and advocating for grooming children? Maybe he's a pedo. Or maybe not. I don't really think he is, but I think there are many who are. They come out and they say, this is about affirming identity. And many of these Democrats, for tribal reasons, because they're looking for red meat, will just say, yeah, Republicans are fascists. They sue over a bill that doesn't say gay in it and bars straight discussion as well as gay discussion. So what's their point? They want to have sex conversations with children. I mean, that's really it. I dare you to give me a response that makes sense. They've tried, they can't do it. Because the bill primarily stops teachers from having secret conversations. That is to say, even with the bill, and I'm sure DeSantis will argue this, his people, Your Honor, under this bill, a teacher could have a private discussion with a student about identity or orientation. What is prohibited is withholding that information from parents, telling the child not to talk to their parents, and having full classroom instruction on these issues. But if a child is dealing with something, the teacher can still talk to them. So what do they really want? They want to have these conversations with your kids in secret. They want to tell your kids, don't tell your parents. That's what groomers do. That's what pedos do. We have protocol for how to deal with adults who abuse children. We ask the kids, has anyone told you not to tell your parents or your teachers or the police about something that's happening? And then, yeah. Who? My uncle said if anyone found out, I'd get in trouble. And that's why we ask these things. And that's why we take it very seriously when there are predators who tell kids, don't tell your parents. You'll get in trouble. You can talk to me. These teachers will be with these kids for 1 year. The parents will be with them their entire lives. What gives these people the right? What makes them think they have the right to withhold developmental information and psychological issues from the parents of these children? The reality is they're preying upon them. They're predators. They want to exploit this. Get your kids out of these schools and homeschool them. Get them in pod learning. It's time to develop some kind of company around pod learning as well. Pod learning, I know it's a weird phrase, is where a bunch of kids from a local neighborhood all come together and a group of parents will hire a tutor or teacher to teach them. They'll have one teacher who teaches everything. I think what we should do is have like 10 pods in one area, and the kids will have an overlaid like clan style of learning. That means one student will be with Mrs. Smith, and this will be Clan 1. Then Clan 2 will be Mr. Johnson. These are all teachers who are hired by families. The way it would work is that, let's say you have 30 kids. 10 of them on Monday are with Mrs. Smith, or I'll say 15 are with Mrs. Smith, and 15 are with Mr. Johnson. The next day, they switch. Then you have a third teacher. The idea is that at least once every other day, all the children will eventually interact with each other. So when you have large groups of students, like 100 kids, you don't have a group of 30 that is one classroom. You have a group of 30 that actually move to different teachers, and the structure would oscillate. So half the class would go to a different teacher the next day and then back. That way, all the kids get to interact with each other, learn a little bit from each other and share ideas, while also getting instruction from teachers that you hire that are accountable to you as parents. That's how you scale it up. Or keep it small. My concern is social development. Kids playing with each other is very important for social development, peer learning, and I'm also concerned about immunity. Kids being exposed to other kids, they may get sick, but it does help strengthen their immune system, so you do want to have a diverse network of how these students can interact with each other. But you know what? I think Democrats are absolutely losing the culture war. I really do. February 16th, 2022, Democrats are warning their own that voters in swing districts think the party is preachy, judgmental, and focused on culture wars and need to be more forceful in response to Republicans. Yeah, the general congressional ballot right now, polling, shows Republicans with a lead. Everyone is expecting Republicans to sweep. Ron DeSantis' agenda is passing. Most Americans support it. The Democrats have gone insane, and let them. Fine. Good riddance. Where that leaves us, I don't know. I don't know, man. But I'm just sick of the child exploitation. Dave Rubin, he is gay married. He is having, I believe, 2 children through surrogacy. Congratulations, Dave. All my respect to you. Best of luck in being a new parent with your husband. And I'm sure it's going to be one heck of a challenge. Dave's life is his life. He's a smart, successful individual. And I think he's actually going to instill great values in his kids. I take absolutely no issue with him having kids. And that means his kids are going to learn about gay marriage. And that means when Dave finds it appropriate to teach his children about the birds and the bees, or the birds and the birds and the bees and the bees, or the birds, the bees, or whatever you want to call it, that will be up to Dave as a parent. Certain conservatives have criticized Dave because they're into traditional values. I can respect their criticism while telling you, I think Dave can do what he wants to do, and I think he's going to be a good dad. And I think he's going to raise these kids very, very well. I think he's going to teach them good values. Awesome. But guess what? He's the parent. He gets to decide, not some teacher who wants to hold secret conversations with his children. Now, there are conservatives who don't like what Dave is doing and whatever. I don't agree with them. They don't agree with Dave, and they're not going to do anything to stop Dave because Dave is a private individual leading a private life. The conversation he had with Glenn Beck I found very interesting because Glenn said, I love you. I disagree. Yep. What are you going to do? Dave's entitled to his life. See, I have no issue with transgender people or gay marriage. In fact, I want and encourage people to live their lives to the fullest extent. What I have a problem with is strangers grooming and exploiting children, especially and particularly in sexual ways. Now, of course, political and ideological I also take issue with. Kids should learn philosophy and explore the world and be given answers. But it's got to be age appropriate. And that is to say that prepubescent children who do not have the hormones in their bodies yet to comprehend what a lot of these things mean should not be instructed on how to dramatically alter their bodies. I think these conversations should be with the parents when the parents realize, hey, my kid's starting to go through puberty. Maybe it's time to have some of these conversations. It's up to the parents, not the schools. Ron DeSantis seems to agree. I agree. And Disney seems to think they should be grooming your kids. Well, I'm no fan of Disney. I look forward to Daily Wire launching an expanded entertainment network. Right now, they have only a handful of movies, but we need more. Daily Wire, guys, you need to get your TV, smart TV apps like LG and Sony and all that stuff. We have an Android TV downstairs, so we can download Daily Wire, and that's where we'll have to watch your movies, so we can do it. But on most of our TVs, they're LG, and we can't get the Daily Wire app. I tried pulling up in the browser. I couldn't do it. Want to watch your movies, guys? But they'll get it. They'll get it. We're working on similar things. It takes time, but we are going to win. What truly matters is the rights of individuals. That's where I stand. I'll leave it there. Next segment's coming up tonight at 8 p.m. over at youtube.com/TimcastIRL. Thanks for hanging out, and we'll see you all then.